Time twisted. Time shifted. Time was and was not. An eerie silver power flowed through Jack, as though he had invoked it by those words. The power used his mind as its conductor. He sensed how the time stream itself was being negated and annulled. Some psychers of the highest level could distort time thus. Not Jack hitherto, never Jack. Yet now, was he possessed? By no demon, certainly, but by the shining path itself. To his senses, that path now appeared to be the track of a phosphorescent arrow through twisted geometries. The arrow had accumulated a charge at its point, until that point could transfix the fabric of time itself, pinning time temporarily like a moth with a needle through its spine. "Run now!" cried Jack. Did he and his abnormal family flit like hummingbirds which seemed to flicker directly from one point in space to another, passing in and out of existence? Afterwards, Jack believed they must have darted thus, across the static, time-stopped chamber of glory, past the frozen companions, and through the Titan archway between the motionless, menacing colossi. And still, the lustrous arrow impaled the tissue of time. Throbbing pipes ribbed the walls of the vast throne room beyond. The muscles of the room were thick power cables feeding Stegosaurian engines. The air was spiked with crisp ozone and bitter myrrh, and ointmented with balmy, somewhat greasy fragrances. The holiest battle banners, icons, and golden fetishes flanked the arena of dedication where psychers were soul-bound. Squads of Emperor's companions who guarded that vast hall, a mob of tech priests ministering to the machinery, a gaudy Cardinal Palatinate and his entourage, a red-robed High Lord of Terror and his staff, not to mention great clusters of astropaths, chirurgeons, scholastics, battlemasters, all were motionless. The immense, soaring, tube-ridged throne resembled some fossilized, metastasized sloth crafted by a mad master of the Adeptus Titanicus. And it seemed to Jack, though he did not know whether what he saw was true or mere delusion instilled by that same psychodream, that this enormous, sacred prosthetic device, more precious by far than any gold, framed the wizened, mummified face of the God Emperor, who looked not, though he saw through eyes of the mind, saw far beyond his throne room and his palace and the solar system, who breathed not, yet he lived more fiercely than any mortal, enduring a psychically supercharged life in death. "We are curious," came a mighty anguished thought which itself transcended time. "We have followed your intrusion into our sanctuary, our antrum and adytum." "My lord." Jack sank to his knees. "I beg to report to you before I am destroyed. I may have uncovered a major conspiracy. Then we will strip your soul bare. Relax, mortal man, or you will surely die in such pain as we always endure." Jack breathed deeply, slowly, stilling the panic that fluttered under his ribs like a trapped bird. He surrendered himself. A hurricane roared through his mind. If the story that he had thought to relate were a tangled forest, and if each event in that story were a tree, then within moments all the leaves were stripped away from all of the trees, denuding them to bare, wintry twigs, to a raw, basic life without the foliage of memories. He was drained of his story. That was sucked from him in a trice, all of those leaves whirling into the mind-maw of the master. Jack gagged. Jack drooled. He was an imbecile. Less than an imbecile. He was less than a newborn baby. He neither knew where he was, nor who he was, nor what it even meant to be someone. The Inquisitor sprawled. All that was known to his body was distress, the gurglings of the guts, breath and light from afar. Abruptly, all memory flooded back. On that instant, each leaf sprouted anew to recloak the forest of his life. "We have put back what we took and tasted, Inquisitor." Trembling, Jack regained his kneeling posture and wiped his lips and chin. The previous moments were a hideous limbo, unknowable, immeasurable. He was Jack Draco again. "We are many, Inquisitor." The voice boomed in his mind almost gently. If gently was how an avalanche would sweep away a doomed village. If gently was how a scalpel might strip a life to the bare, aching bones. How else could we administer our Imperium, as well as winnow the warp? How else? The Emperor's mind voice had dissociated into several voices, as if his great undying soul coexisted in fragments that barely hung together. So does the Hydra threaten us? Imperiling our great and awful plan to steer humanity? Did we ourselves devise the Hydra? Perhaps in a part of us, since this Hydra promises a path. Surely a malevolent path, for how could humanity ever free itself? Then we must be malevolent too, for we have expelled our sentimentality long ago. How else could we have endured? How else could we have imposed our rule? Yet by virtue of that, we are pure and uncontaminated by weakness. We are grim salvation. Beside Jack, the squat twitched as if he had heard himself named. At that moment, did the voice resonate within the abhuman. Jack felt that he was listening to a mighty mind machine argue with itself in a way that no Imperial courtier had perhaps ever heard, and that no High Lord of Terror even suspected could occur. Were Melindy and Google aware of the voices in the way that Jack was? Or was he imagining it all, caught up in some warp-spawned delusion? Yet another twist in this labyrinthine conspiracy. He sensed the fabric of time attempting to tear free and guessed that not much longer of this strange stasis remained. Nothing that safeguards humanity can be evil, not even the most strenuous inhumanity. If the human race fails, it has failed forever. "Great Lord of all," whimpered Jack, "did you know of the Hydra before now?" "No, and we shall surely act in due time." "Yet surely we knew. How could we not know?" "Once we have analyzed the information within this sub-mind of ours. Hear this, Jack Draco. Only tiny portions of us can heed you. Otherwise we neglect our Imperium, of which our scrutiny must not falter for an instant. For time does not halt everywhere within the realm of man. Indeed, time only halts for you. We are an ever-watchful Lord, are we not? Did you hope to gain our undivided attention? How else should we soul-bind psychers and overview the warp and beam, the astronomican beacon, and survive and receive information and grant audiences all at once, unless we are many? And yet still we miss so much, so very much, such as that which guided you here. Our spirit guided you. No, another spirit, a reflection of our goodness which we thrust from us. We are the only source of goodness, severe and drastic. There is no other source of hope than us. We are agonizingly alone. Contradictions. These warred in Jack's mind, just as they seemed to coexist in the Emperor's own multi-mind. Was another power for salvation present in the galaxy, unknown to the suffering Emperor, concealed from him, though somehow partaking of his essence? How could that be? And what of the Hydra? Did the Emperor truly know of it or not, even now? Might he refuse to acknowledge what Jack had reported to him? The Emperor's voices faded from Jack's mind as time tried to stretch back into shape. Grim tugged at Jack's sleeve,